Screen. All right, we are live. Hey, this is Joe McCarthy, with one of my newest friends, Michael H. Ballard of Resiliency for Life. Say hello, Michael.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. So the connection is really interesting to me, how some people would call it serendipity, and I'm learning to call this synchronicity, that life sometimes lines up the way it's supposed to, right? Not always, but sometimes it does. And maybe it always does, and you just don't see it that way. But anyway, so my friend Russ Hansen is a part of Michael's Facebook group called Resiliency for Life. And some of my friends would know Russ Hansen. He's been through quite a trauma himself and has come up very strong on the other side. So Russ told me, hey, Joe, you got to check out this Facebook page, Resiliency for Life. And I did, and I loved it. And I started just throwing in my posts from time to time.
Thank you.
Michael says, hey, I love what you're doing here. I'd love to connect with you. And so this was just a few days ago. So I said to Michael, hey, want to go on my podcast? He's, yes, absolutely. So here we are. All right. Hey, Michael, tell us a little bit about what even got you into Resiliency for Life. Tell us a little bit what it is, and then how did you get into it?
Sure. Resiliency has two major components. What's going on in here and what's going on around you. And so resiliency is a beliefs and values and skill set to help us deal with life's big stuff issues. And to be clear, what's big for you could be easy for me, and what's tough for me could be easy for you. So there's no judgment with resiliency. You can't judge yourself. You can be mystified, but don't judge. Don't be harsh. So resiliency comes down to, do you have the issue, or does the issue own you?
Wow.
And for a few seconds, minutes, or even a few hours, depending on the size of the issue, either one is very acceptable. But resiliency said, throw off the issue owning you. You own the issue. So, for example, when I got my cancer diagnosis the first time around, scared out of my mind, and then after 20 minutes of crying in the parking lot, sitting in my car, it was like, all right, to misquote a famous singer, shake it off, shake it off. I swear she stole my best line. And one day I'll even get a letter from her lawyer saying no. And so it was like, okay, your parents have talked to you about life's big stuff moments in many ways. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to ask for help. Oh, wait, I've already started. I got a famous surgeon on the east coast of Canada who's been out of the continent because he's learned something over in Europe that they don't do in North America. So his surgical techniques are world class. Woo! I'm underway. Oh, he's in a university hospital where we're going to have students as well as the doctor. So it's like free opinions. Maybe they're not as informed as his because he's been around for 12 years. But on the other hand, I'm going to be in a learning situation where I'm going to engage with medical students, which is, to me, awesome. Not everybody likes that, but I appreciate it because it gives your life a little more meaning that this old bod was having 12 medical students once a week at least, sitting on grand rounds asking me and the doctor questions. And so I got to learn a little more about myself. So that got me started. But I got really interested in you and me and being different. At 6 or 7, I had a concussion. And within a day, I had a roommate. Now, with my concussion, my eyes hurt, my ears hurt. There was a ringing. The headache was profound. It was like there was a brass drum in my head with every heartbeat. But my roommate, he stood up, yelled, screamed, and shouted. Where was his father? Where were his grandparents? Where was Bubba? And I'm like, could you tone it down, buddy? Like, how can you have a concussion and yell so loud?
Right.
And of course, as an adult, I found out our two responses were both exactly what they could be. With a head trauma, head injury, some of us get real quiet because, boy, does it hurt. And some of us get really agitated. This was the 60s. There was no flights home for daddy on business every hour on the hour like we have before the pandemic. It was, you booked 3 days in advance. Maybe you could get a flight. And both sets of grandparents were in the U.S. It was, I think, May time. My vegetable garden had just been planted, and grandparents had driven down to visit other relatives, one in Florida, set in Florida, one in Arizona. He wasn't going to have any other people other than his mother for a good day and a half, and he was angry. So that got me at 6 or 7 really fascinated that two people, almost identical issue, major difference in response. So,
wow. Well, before we move on beyond this incident, tell the story of the concussion. What exactly happened? How old were you? What was the circumstance?
Well, it took me 2 years to learn how to ride a bike, 2 summers, because this works pretty darn good. I'm really pleased. But this, at 6 or 7, physical skills were very limited. So my dad taught me, steering, pedaling, balance, safety. But as I love to tease the little kids I live near, I'm so old, bicycle helmets hadn't been invented yet.
Right.
So I was pedaling on my gravel road, and the little 4-year-old saw me. I nodded. She nodded. And as I got close, she turned the other way and ran in front of me. And we're talking, I missed her by about a foot. I managed to steer around her. I'm very proud of that accomplishment. But then I went down the ditch and hit the only rock in the ditch, because as soon as I hit the bottom of the ditch, it was muddy and wet, and I stopped like instantly, and I went over the handles in slow motion because I wasn't going that fast. But you hit dirt, you hit mud, your wheels sink in, you stop.
Right. Yeah.
So, another lesson on safety. When there's pedestrians, you move out and you let them know twice that you're there, not once. So
right.
it was, a painful lesson, but.
As my dad likes to say, it's not the fall that hurts you, Joe. It's the sudden stop at the bottom.
Very wise. Yes, absolutely. And it was a sudden stop. Later in life, I was riding a relative on my handlebars. Not supposed to do that, but whatever. You do what you do when you're 17.
Right.
And one of the running shoelaces got caught in my front wheel. And I learned enough from the first time that when we went down, I put my head up and my arms out. So I have bone chips, permanent injuries.
Were you wearing a helmet?
It took twice to learn.
Were you wearing a helmet the second time?
Still no helmets. I'm that old. They still weren't invented.
Right.
Bike riders that did marathons, like the Tour de France, had started to have these little leather helmety things that, to quote one of them later in life, they just made you look prettier in the casket if you got hit.
Right. Well, take me back to when you were 6 and you're in the hospital and you have this concussion. So what was going through your mind, and how did you respond to this, and what did you learn in that process?
Well, what was really fascinating as a kid was, again, my roommate was yelling, screaming, and shouting, and I was quite amazed. And I asked for them to move him, and they went, "This isn't a hotel." So my parents showed up, and my mom and dad are very polite and very, very gentle around experts, but they went, "Okay, he's put up with this young man for 2 days." This young man had been put in a giant stainless steel crib because he kept getting out of his bed and going to the nurse's station, yelling the whole way.
Yeah.
I think my son deserves some quiet to help with his healing. Mm-hmm. So I believe there was a couple of doctors involved, and I suddenly had a private room. Not something I think my parents paid for, because 1961, not a lot of private rooms, but
right.
I got peace and quiet. So again, 2 people, almost identical issues and total polar opposite responses. And I just remember that my eyes hurt, my ears hurt. Could everybody whisper, and could I have an aspirin?
Right. And you were aware, even at that age, that you had the same injury as this other guy, but totally different response. Is that right?
Yeah, that fascinated me to no end. And my mother was like, "Well, he's having his own reaction his way." And I'm like, to myself, in my thinking was like, "Well, yeah, that's bloody stupid. You got a headache. You'd scream with a headache? Like, really?" But again, as I said, as an adult, I discovered that head injuries, we were both being very typical of head injuries. One at the quiet end and one at the loud end. So it was, in many ways, it really got me to think, like, wow.
Yeah.
Not good or bad, but how different and how friggin' annoying.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, in many ways, that observation, even at that young age, of the same injury, different response, different people handling different ways, that really was the kernel, right? That was the seed that was planted that has now shown fruit in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that got me thinking. And then fast forward 10, 11 years, I got a chronic illness diagnosis. And I remember the doctor saying, "Your family has no medical history of this at all. Your parents, your uncles and aunties, your cousins, your grandparents, this is a bit of a mystery." And by then I was blessed that I'd taken my Shaolin martial arts, and a new university had been built less than 40 minutes from my house with a large library. So my family's big on, so what do the experts say? Yeah. And what have you found out? And what have you found out anecdotally? Have you found anybody else with this issue? So listen to the experts. Don't do anything foolish that could make it worse. But what can you do? Because the expert with good intention, my gastroenterologist, had done the 1970s thing of, there's nothing you can do, Michael. And of course, I went to the new university called York University, for those that know Toronto or Ontario. And one of the librarians said, what are you here for? I just want to see if there's any articles about managing chronic illness. Oh, said the librarian, there's new research from Harvard out. Off I go. Dewey Decimal System, the old days, no Mr. Google then.
Pull out the card, look through the cards, right?
And go and get, and it's like, you know, I'm not a member of the university. I'm a high school student from up the road. So power read the observations. Oh, go to my local library in my hometown. Luckily, they are interconnected, so they could borrow other books. And within a year of me finding that research, there was a best-selling book, Minding the Body, Mending the Mind. So it was about brain training, skills, beliefs, and values, and the impact it had. And darned if it didn't align with what I'd learned in Shaolin Kung Fu, which was like, okay, now I got no excuses. I spent 3-4 years, 4 nights a week taking martial arts. Again, not so good. So I only got to orange.
Oh, well.
But physically, I got to orange. But mentally, my instructor in the dojo, Lauren, was quite remarkable. And the skills he taught for breathing, calmness, having him challenge me, not threaten me, but challenge me. Michael, this police officer said you scare him because you're physically much faster than him. Now, Lauren was 29, I was 13, 14. The officer was in his 30s. You know, when you're 14, 35 is so old. The poor guy almost needed a cane and a walker.
Totally.
Now, 7, I think that's funny. But anyways.
Yeah.
So we did sparring, play fighting for the uninformed, where I'm not allowed to hit you. I'm supposed to, if I throw a punch, I'm supposed to touch you. Just to let you know that I could have broken your nose.
Right.
Or if you could throw a good kick back in the day, just to let you know that, oh, yeah, I could have knocked you down, maybe unconscious.
Right.
So I'm thinking, but this guy's 6'4". This man's a Golden Glove boxing championship, and as a teenager and in his late 20s, he's a Golden Glove boxing championship in a new weight category. Again, what do I stand a chance at? And oh, he's so tall that his arms are 3 inches longer than me, and his legs are 4 inches longer than, like, I'm toast. Yeah. My instructor said, Michael, why are you judging him against you? He said, you're just fast. And he said, he's seeing you chatter and make people laugh when they're supposed to be sparring. And he's worried you're going to break concentration. Because I'd say things in the dojo like, oh, I see your mother did your toenails. Hey, I gotta use every advantage I can.
That's
so
right.
I can't beat
Get him
you
distracted so you can whack him.
I'll beat you with mouth.
Yeah, perfect.
And so I got to beat him once or twice in the point system. And he won a couple too, but my instructor was like, Michael, this is powerful in you differently than him. He got a different body than you, but quit judging that you're beat before you start. Yeah, so it was really a good lesson that do you have the issue or does the issue have you? And he was like, you own the issue. Don't you dare. So with my diagnosis of chronic illness, it was like, I'm going to own the issue. And I found the Harvard research. I don't expect medical specialists to be mental health specialists, but by then the research was showing if you did certain things mentally and emotionally, you could have 20% less symptoms. That's profound. That's a big number. That's in the 70s. It's better now.
That's awesome. Let's pause here just for a second, Michael. There's some really good stuff I want to make sure our listeners don't miss. And see, we're going to get an echo here. How can I eliminate that? Hopefully, do you hear an echo or is that just me?
Just you.
All right, moving on. A couple of things you've said here that they're kind of universal principles that I don't want people to miss. It's not just your story; it's our story, right?
Yes.
So one is that you get into martial arts and you learn that there's the mind part of the fighting, and then there's the body part of the fighting. And as you said, you had the superior intellect, but the body wasn't hanging in there, right?
It's an integrated approach: rational, emotional, physical. Yep.
Yeah. So then, when you look in this Harvard new literature about your medical condition, you're seeing some of the same truth, right? That there's the mental part wisdom. And there's the physical part. Yeah. So
scientifically validated.
Yeah. So it's wisdom or it's truth or whatever you want to call it in a big universal sense. And you recognize you get that from both sides. Yeah. And then the other point I wanted to make is that in your play fighting in the dojo, this guy's taller, older, bigger, longer, stronger, all these things, right?
And he's
And
been
I love what
trained
you
by the
said.
police to fight, not just boxing. I'm like,
Yeah. But I love what you said. You said in your mind, you were already toast before you ever started. But
yep.
turns out that's not the case. You just thought you were toast before you started. So really
And
the
that had
battle.
business implications later
Oh
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got hired as the first non-master's degree business consultant for a large package goods firm. And I went on to beat 80% of them in the marketplace because I didn't have an MBA, and that's okay. I had 5 semesters of college. It was a 4-semester course. I took an extra semester. Ooh, it was the 70s, okay? I went all the way. And what I had that they didn't have was I had social emotional skills. So I had 100% loyalty, and I would come in and say, head office is introducing this. You already do this. I'm going to share everything because I'm obligated to represent but that doesn't mean you have to do it. So I'm going to tell you the truth from the company. I'm going to give you my perspective. You're really smart. Let's hash out what will help you make more money.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And 80% just showed up and parroted. They were not really engaging anybody. And so I threw out the model I was trained in. And again, go back to the Shaolin Kung Fu, the Harvard Business. It was about not Harvard Business, Harvard Mind Body. It was about emotional intelligence, social intelligence, calming this so you could focus, because I'm easily excitable because I love life. So, you show up today and it's like, oh, he's got birds in the background. I'm jealous. I have construction noise in a mall next door that's opening up slowly.
Yeah.
And honking, but no birds. So
I love no, this is really good. I want to keep going, but again, I want to just highlight some of these really great principles that are coming out. And one is you get into this business, you weren't as qualified as the others, you had a different kind of education, but rather than feeling like I don't have a chance, you're thinking I have an advantage. That's a big difference in your mind, right?
Yes, because the chronic illness taught me that,
yes.
and the dojo taught me that just because you don't have the same doesn't mean you're not equal. So I have my favorite phrase now is you and I are different but equal.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Skills and experience, education, all wonderful, but work ethic and social emotional skills can toast a lot of others in a hurry.
Big time. Yeah, I was just talking to my friend Michael Leckie about transformation in organizations, and one of the illustrations he gave was he went into an organization and they were having a hard time coming up with creativity and innovation within their organization. So he put them on an assignment and they went down to a kindergarten down the street. They observed and they came back with all these great ideas how to make the kindergarten better. And they were brilliant, just fabulous ideas. And then the exercise is over and Michael says, okay, now let's do the same thing with your organization. And they got nothing. They can't think outside of what they've already been trained to think in their organization. So they had to bring in outside consultants and pay them lots of money, people who knew nothing about their organization so that they could think freely. They could play, really was the answer. They could play with their ideas and not be afraid that, oh, it doesn't fit within the paradigm. And that's really what emotional intelligence is, right? It's compassion, it's empathy, and it's the ability to say, there are rules and they're there for a reason, but that isn't all there is.
No. And so I'm a big fan of some books and devices from the 80s. So there was 6 thinking hats, 6 ways to approach every issue. Love it, love it, love it. I still buy copies used off the net and give them away to the teenagers in my life saying, hey, you're really smart. You're inheriting the world that's just as bent as the one I inherited, but it's bent in a new way compared to when I inherited it. So here's a way to get collaboration and cooperation from those that you're going to work with and volunteer with, etc. Here's 6 action shoes, how to implement 6 thinking hats. And then if they're master's degree and higher, I like to introduce them to a kick in the seat of the pants and a whack in the side of the head books. Now, those titles are politically incorrect these days, but in the 80s, they were like, yes, yes. Right. Again, because it's all about disrupting your current thinking, because we do get tunnel vision. We get comfortable, and it's hard to break down the side doors and break out.
Yeah. So, I've often said that we tend to limit ourselves to like 2 options, either or. Yes, no, black, white, left, right. Well, that's not all the options that are out there, right?
No.
So I've been trying to encourage people to say, what if there's a third option? It's somewhere in the middle. And you're saying, what I love you just said is there might be 6 options. There might be an infinite number of options, right? So why limit ourselves to just 2?
I worked for a giant package goods company at one point with 30,000 staff approximately in North America. And they'd been doing ordering. This is when mainframes were still in charge. Desktops for business were on the horizon, but only if you had large 5 figures or 6 figures. So we were still doing everything, man. I actually wore out back then $150 desktop calculators, and I got really good. I could use 6 fingers to do math on the calculator. I wore out 2 of them during my tenure with them. And I remember saying to them, so you having us in today's dollars managing $5 to $25 million each of 80 of us, but you're getting us to add these orders up after we've taken them, and we never deliver more than 97.3% of the order. So why are we doing things to the penny? You're asking me to do grade 6 to grade 12 math at most, when I should be out consulting, selling, managing, looking for new business, client relationships, because for 6 to 8 weeks of the year, you want me to stay at home and do all this math.
Right.
It's really important, and I get it, but wouldn't it be better if we just did it to the $1,000 mark and then sent it in?
Yeah.
They ended up hiring 25 people with grade 12 math skills to do all our math, and it took 120 hours. It put it back into my schedule. And so then I was able to go out and sell more, and people were like, I hated it. And somebody said, how did it happen? And they said, Ballard sent a letter to the board. But everybody was going to stay with the status quo, and it's like, no.
Right. That's so awesome.
I'm good with business math, but it's boring.
Yeah. Another application of this is metrics, right? So my friend Michael, who's a organizational consultant, he says, unfortunately, we measure progress or output or whatever with metrics that were designed for the dark ages, and everything has changed. The digital world has changed the speed of business. It's changed the measurements, but we haven't updated our metrics to follow suit. So we're measuring today's business on yesterday's models, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't help. It doesn't change anything. And like you said, you're using some of your top dollar people who you're paying the biggest salaries and the most benefits to do high school math, when you could hire a math student to do that and send them out to do strategy and tactics and all that kind of stuff.
So it works. It really pays off. I remember the business model I was given was I was supposed to consult with you, the retail store owner of 5 stores. And I remember I had the president of a pharmacy association for Eastern Canada as one of my clients. Smart. And one day in my last couple of calls, because I'd been transferred, his assistant store manager said, your approach and the owner's approach to people are similar. When I started here 12 years ago, after a year, he pulled me aside and took me to supper. He gave me a week. What's the meeting about? He said, relax. And he said he basically told me that as a pharmacist and his employer, you're not that special. My cashier is more important than my bottom line than you'll ever be, because she greets them on the way in. She thanks them on the way out. You're just dispensing pills when you're really busy. When you're not real busy, you're not bad. So he said he told me that if I was to keep my employment, I had to do the following things and read the following books and go to the following courses. Oh, my brain hurt. In today's words, we would say his social emotional intelligence was low. Yeah. I got a sense that he was very IQ smart as a pharmacist. Sure. And he'd taken advanced courses to work towards being a pharmacologist, where you actually design medication. Then he decided that it wasn't his. So he was smart. But his people skills, oh my gosh, the first time I met him in my first year with him, he was just in the middle of his learning curve that the owner had put him. And so as I was leaving, this guy said to me, and he's told me that I should buy him out in 7 years because he'll be hitting 60. And he wants to, over 7 years, retire. But he said there's a clause in there that if I get arrogant, he can pull the plug.
I love it. All right.
So his profits, because of his social skills, the owner, and then helping this young guy get it, and then he brought on a female pharmacist, his profits per square foot were way above average, like 19% above average when I started, and we worked hard, and we got him up over 25% average in a tiny store with not a lot of space. So he was, to use a corny phrase from my boxing friend, punching above his weight.
Yeah, that's right.
Eventually,
just like you did back in the dojo.
Yep, he actually closed his office in the store and brought it home and had one of his staff work out of his house, because he said, it's my Christmas and Valentine's department. So he doubled his space, and he said, I'm netting an extra $15,000 a year by making this little dinky office into a secondary part of the store.
Yeah, that's so
And it was
cool.
that sort of creativity that I went, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly pretty. It works.
It just works, right?
And
Yeah,
it
that's
just made the staff loved him. And the pharmacist that was going to buy him out eventually over time, they started to love him too, because the lady I worked with in the store, she said, I remember when he started airing a little twit, I was ready to pop him one. I wouldn't, but I was ready.
yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Sometimes,
resiliency to me is about that mental flexibility. You still have to stay legal and moral, but like the company that changed over the ordering system for people to actually free up our time, you're going to pay us for this, but you want us to operate at this level for 2 to 3 months of the year. Are you kidding me?
Right. Well, let's tie this back to your personal story, right? So we've heard that you had a trauma when you're in your young childhood, 6 years old, concussion, and then you had a second one. You said you were 17. Is that right?
17 with a chronic illness, and then at 27, I had the cancer diagnosis, and that was the big one.
Yeah, tell us about this cancer.
And so I'd been promoted. I'd been in Toronto, and I was in charge of opening new stores and renovating stores. So I did 50-odd stores in a year. That's a lot of mileage. And then I got into what I went to school for. I got into sales. So because I was the first one that didn't have an advanced degree or a degree at all, but I was in the college system in Canada, I was a test. So they got me into sales because I was new and they weren't sure how good I was, and that's okay. It was nice to be trusted. They assigned me a mentor and a trainer 4 days a week for 6 weeks. Talk about being treated like royalty.
Yeah, fantastic.
Mr. Trevor Hunt, now living in Manitoba, our province out to the west of me. I was with him 4 days a week, 6 to 10 hours a day, depending on where we were. And for the first week, I followed him around. He told me what he was going to do before he went in. He'd give me suggestions on what the conversation could be. Then he executed on the way out. What did he miss? What did he do? And all I was do is say hello and goodbye. And the second week, you're going to plan the call. I'll follow through it. And by the third week, you plan it, you do it, execute, and I'll give you follow-up. And by the sixth week, there was days where he stayed in the car, and I came out and had to tell him how it went. And he'd look at the order, and it was amazing. I just have the highest regard that he put up with this high-energy guy.
Right.
Who was, to quote one of my friends, a pack at the nerves.
Well, that mentoring, that training that you just talked about, it's an incredible model, but it had to be one of the most life-changing experiences in your career. Is that right?
I got 6 weeks at least with this really smart, highly accomplished professional who'd already had 3 levels of sales, and he changed continents because he felt that Canada offered his spouse and kids more security for the future. Because the country he came from was going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
He said, I don't mind immigration. I don't mind a lot of things. But when the economy's tanking and our unemployment rate is huge, we got to do something. And they're not. They're just being fiscally conservative to the point of obnoxiousness. Because he said, managing a country is not managing a house budget. Anyways, he was brilliant. He went on to be a sales manager, a national account manager, then a sales manager. And then he retired early from corporate and owned his own stores in the card and gift industry. And
how old were you when you went through that training? How old were you when you went through this training with this guy?
I was 24, 26.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And I just don't want people to miss this model too. That here's a guy who could do it all himself, right, and had done it all himself. And for whatever reason, you get handpicked to get mentored by the guy, but he doesn't just say, shadow me, but stay quiet in the back of the room. He says, start with that. And then he starts handing you more responsibilities, which is trust, right? He trusts that you're going to take this next step. And he builds
building it up.
Yeah.
So
and then by the end, he's staying in the car with clients who are on the line, real business, real money, real relationships. And he's sending you in saying, I trust that you will do this well. Just come back and report back to me.
Because it was still his territory. It was still his responsibility. Yeah. He was training me to take over, but that happened the last day of the training. So the next Monday, the numbers were my responsibility.
Right. That's awesome. What a great model. Was that his own idea, or was this something that he had taught?
I'm pretty sure that was him.
Yeah. Fantastic.
He didn't always agree with head office, but he was kind, smart. And when I get tired, it doesn't happen often, but I have been known to mix my words and peak funny. So I work with, before when I was in retail going to college, I work with Wendy. Her husband was Dick. But when I got tired twice in the 3 years, it was Wick and Dendy.
Yeah.
So he was Trevor, his spouse was Cheryl, and twice in 6 weeks, it was Shrevor and Trerl. And the first time he was like, pardon me?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be rude. That's just
Would
my
you call
brain.
me?
It does
Would
that
you
now and
call
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, he was not physical. And by the end of the 6 weeks, he was sharing small, respectful, funny, and silly stories about mistakes he's made. So it really humanized and bonded. And
Yeah.
and
Well, that really
later,
go ahead. I was going to say that touches on the power of vulnerability, right? So Brene Brown's very popular right now because she's saying we've grown up in a generation or several generations where vulnerability was hidden. You hide behind the shield, behind the armor. I've got it all together. Follow me because I'm the answer guy. And that model's falling apart, of course, and isn't really serving anybody. And here's a guy who's got all the armor. He has it all together. And he says, hey, by the way, I made this mistake and I had this problem. And yeah, you've got flaws, but so do I. And then just imagine, explain the bond that happens there.
well, it gets very deep and very wide.
Yeah.
So as he goes up the ladder, I'd send him a memo just to him. FYI, this appears to be an issue.
Wow.
This is before faxes even and before same day, next day courier. So
No text, no nothing. Yeah.
little red sticker on the envelope with an extra $1, and it would get there within 48 hours. If you got it at the post office before noon, and he was only 3 hours down the highway. But
Right.
hey, it was the late 70s. But
Yeah.
he was advanced. And so he shared little things and medium things before the end of the 6 weeks training of mistakes he'd made when he was in business. And he also said, if the company screws up, tell them.
Yeah.
Don't be one of those goes, well, it's not my job. It's not my job. So
Right.
eventually, in my last 3 years, our senior VP would call me saying, Michael, I'm told you'll tell me the truth. And I'm like, oh, geez.
Right. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Who told you that?
I don't want to be the guy to get anybody in trouble.
Right.
And he was very astute. He said, Michael, this isn't to get anybody in trouble, but there's a process problem right now. Why did we launch this and nothing's happened? He said, but I'm told you're at 90%. How is it that you, out of 80 people, said, well, it's not because I'm smarter, but I have stopped paying attention. I said, I have 17 binders. I have 3 feet of binders in front of me, some of them with 4 inches thick of stuff I'm supposed to know and follow. I said, it's impossible.
Yeah.
I read every page of training twice, but now I'm a little rusty. So when you send me a product and it's sales and that's income for the company, that's my number one priority. I have a foot of paperwork for those 17 binders it's supposed to file. I said, we're becoming a bureaucracy. And I said, we're not lean, keen sales machines if I do all the paperwork. I look at that once a month, and if I can't do it in a day, it gets pushed to the next month. Oh. I said, so if you looked at my binders, I might get a 6 out of 10 for maintenance of policy manuals. But if you look at my sales, I mean, I was sick once for 4 months off work, but I had a week's notice that I needed emergency cancer surgery. So I phoned my clients, the top 80%. The bottom 20% only saw me twice a year because they were so tiny that they phoned in their orders and we had a telephone system.
Yeah.
So I didn't give them a lot of love, but
Sure.
and I visited each one of them saying, so it looks like I'm going to be off work fighting cancer for 6 to 12 weeks. I need your commitment to keep safe and profitable. Not because it's my say-so, but it's your firm, your money, your budget.
Yeah.
With a lot of them, I stopped selling to them from the second visit saying, how do I help you make more profit? How do I help you with your staffing issues? So I was doing staff training. I was teaching staff cleaning skills. I was a janitor while I went to college. I got trained to hospital standards. So I can out-clean 70% of the population easily, if not most of them. Anyways, and so I had this loyalty factor. And out of the top 80%, I think I had 19 out of the 21 that did exactly what I recommended. And I found out years later, one of the 19 had a crush on me. So she over-ordered like probably about 5 years worth of stuff that I had to send back when I got healthy.
That's a whole nother story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another whole story. I was old and taken, so nothing more than a handshake happened. But if I'd have been single, I might have quit the job and her and I'd run off together. But that's and so it really worked because they trusted me because I never had a sales agenda. I had a let's make you profits.
Right.
How do we reduce inventory, increase sales? If we can do that, your money's working smarter and harder. It just works.
Well, what I keep hearing in your conversation, in several conversations I've had over the last several months, actually for years, really, and I just didn't necessarily recognize it, is that the bottom line for business, for life is relationships, right? And if you treat people the way they want to be treated, not just the way you want to be treated, it used to be the golden rule is treat others the way that you would want them to treat you. And that's good. That's nothing wrong with that. That's a universal
good place
principle.
to start, but maybe I don't want to be treated like you like to treat you.
Yeah, exactly. So the platinum rule, right? Treat others the way they want to be treated. And that's what you're saying is this is called, in the faith world, this is servant leadership, and Jesus modeled that very well.
Yes.
And I'm seeing this pop up in every aspect, from Tony Robbins to Simon Sinek to John Maxwell to all these gurus. They're all saying the same thing in different words. They're saying if you put the people first, the profit will come. And that's exactly what my degree was at Pepperdine. It was organizational development. You put the people first, you make them succeed, you give them the tools and the support, and you will profit, and they'll have a great life. And then what you'll have is trust and loyalty and longevity and lower turnover and all those other great things.
I had a client who was in the top. He was number 13 in Canada, and his profits and his sales were so high that he was, in a couple of cases, the only company in North America that a couple of U.S. producers sold to, because he sold so much that he was outselling department stores with 20 locations across the whole country. And on more than one occasion, some VP of sales from the US would show up, and it happened from Canadian companies too. So it's not a US thing. They were VPs, and they'd come in and they look at his store, and it was a card and gift store, art supplies. He sold the top 100 paperbacks. He sold the top 25 cookbooks. He was a one-stop shop if you were in a hurry looking for a really decent mid-price gift. And his staff were impeccable. And I remember meeting him the first time. He said, we'll get along if you don't jam your company's agenda down my throat. You help me make more profits, we will do more business. So we shared numbers, and he said, what do you think? I said, well, you're doing 22 stock turns a year off your primary product from us. That's remarkable. But I would love to see if we can get you to 24. He said, now we're talking.
Yeah.
So
because you cared about him.
He agreed to order 4 days a week instead of 2 days a week. And we got him to 23.2 over 4 years, but we could never get him to 24. It was like, I even worked a few hours for free every month just because it was such a matter of pride. But these VPs would come in, look at his store, and they would accuse him of lying. He must be selling out the back door. It's impossible. Yeah. And he said to me, and then he said to them, I've been in business for, I forget at the time, 23 years. My longest serving employee is 22 years, and my newest employee is 11 years. So my training costs for staff turnover are 0.
Exactly.
My cleaning staff costs are close to 0 because my regular staff clean when we're slow. Yeah. So that means for a couple of months a year, this place gets cleaned thoroughly more than once a year.
Awesome.
My windows, I brought in the best window treatment designer I could find at a price that I could barely believe they could charge and get away with. But their references were enormous. My sales went up 12% when they started doing my windows. And they did that for a year. And they knew when they came in that I had a 3 or 4 year plan. Then after the first year, she started talking to my 3 long-term employees saying, so I'm planning windows for these seasons. Similar to my Trevor Hunt fella.
Right.
What do you think the color theme would be for this season? What's traditional? How do you mix it up? How do we do something different? And he said by the 4th year, she came in and evaluated, and then she was done. And I paid her full deal for full meal deal, even though she wasn't doing all the work in the 3rd, 4th year.
Yeah.
But I said, my sales are still strong. Absolutely. So when these people come and tell me I'm doing this, I'm doing that, he said, get stuff. They always told me, you pay them too much. Again, my training costs are 0. Yes, this is the 80s. I paid them $6 an hour above average. But all of them, they've had attempted people to be poached by other chains. Sure. And one of them left me after 6 years back in the day, and there was a downturn and they got laid off, and they came back not groveling, but I made a mistake. He said, I've never laid off anybody. When sales are awesome and sales are bad, when sales are good, we all just buckle down, work a couple extra hours. They get paid for it. But he said, I don't want to bring anybody on. This is a family. I pay them like he had 3 locations. I pay really well. I expect incredible performance. His standards were, and the staff all said, he's really an awesome guy. He's just a little grouchy about when you're overly social. Meaning no 20-minute jokes.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I remember one of his staff said to me, so what are we going to do? Sales are slow. I brought in a new idea. She did everything. I went to the florist and I bought her an $80 bouquet of flowers and said, I can't thank you enough. Like, you not only listened, but you executed perfectly. And so one of the older ladies said, I appreciated her work. Do I get any flowers?
Right.
So it's that developing people and staying loyal and giving them. So he could have kept a lot more money, but he'd had a lot more heartburn, a lot more grief.
Yeah.
And the staff appreciated that he did small things that raised the bar. So he had 2 pair of slacks in his office in case he got dirty. He had 3 dress shirts. He always wore a fresh one after lunch. Because image is really important. I don't expect staff to have 2 sets of clothes here, but I'm in charge.
Yeah.
And so he ended up having 6 exclusive confidential clients. This was the 80s. There was no internet. He'd get a phone call. And I was there once when it happened. A phone call, Mrs. X, a famous Canadian or spouse of famous Canadian, placing an order. The butler showed up a few hours later, and it was for $10,000. The first part of the order was already ready, and they'd come back tomorrow, and they came back tomorrow with a check with the invoice. I said, good for you. He said, Michael, I worked hard to get to this level. And he said, those 6 celebrities, one of them owns property 3 places in the world, and they buy all their supplies for their events from me, and they ship it because I'm quiet. I'll go to my grave, and nobody else will know who the customers are.
Right back to trust. Again, that's a trust relationship right there.
Huge.
Yep.
I mean, I saw the butler come in with his uniform, and I bought custom clothing for career search, trying to look more than my college diploma because I was competing against people with degrees. So, you got to look prosperous, right? And that butler's uniform cost more than any 2 of my custom suits.
For sure, yeah.
So these were people of money. And since he retired and then passed, his son has hinted on who one of the people were. And that one professional puts on 2 events a year, one for the Children's Hospital and one for another charity, and she regularly raises millions.
Yeah.
So for her to trust him, because it's her safety at stake, because the butler came in and you follow them home, you know where they live and all those things. And
for privacy. Yep.
All the privacy. It was so remarkable. And when I was ill, the company made a mistake and sent me his it's not a bonus. It was a rebate check. For every $100,000 you achieved in sales, we gave you a 0.25% back. But when you got to a certain level, the percentages got quite nice.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so I was supposed to hand deliver the check and say thank you and, go to buy him lunch. And I was in the hospital fighting cancer and having surgery. So by mistake, it got couriered to my house. My wife said, this came. I said, open it up. Open it up. The privacy envelope. Yep. Okay, that's for him. Don't see me for 2 days. Just get him the check. So she phoned, yes, it'll be in, because I said, don't give it to a staff. We don't want that lost. That's a payroll for the month or whatever. Well, she phoned me when she got home, and she was excited and sad. She said, I got told, thank you very much. He shook my hand off, and he sent me home with 2 $90 teddy bears for the kids.
Awesome.
And she said, I am to tell you, I am to never put family ahead of work. Just let the check get dusty.
Absolutely. That's so cool.
So
tell us about your diagnosis of cancer. It sounds like it was like a sudden and unexpected experience.
Yes.
What was the cancer and what happened?
I had cancer in the lower intestine beside my liver. And so going into it with the diagnosis, I had an apple core structure that was growing inside the tumor that was ready to block off, which is really scary.
Yeah.
And after the surgery, 3 days later, the test came back and said out of the 13 lymph nodes they extracted cyst sets, I had cancer in 3 of the locations. So cancer in 4 locations outside of the bowel is a scary thing.
Yeah. How old were you? Did you have family at this time?
26, 27, married, no kids.
Okay. All right.
And so, but I just moved to a new area, more responsibilities, an extra 0 on the sales responsibilities.
Sure.
Nothing like a nice challenge, right? But anyways,
yeah.
My doctor was on medical leave. So I had a doctor on a locum, which, as I understand it, means they've graduated. They haven't got a place of employment yet in a hospital alignment. So they took over this she took it over for 6 months or a year. Okay. Well, I got this fresh out of university, 29-year-old doctor, newly married. Wow, married a year. And Michael, I'm not going to be here in a year, so I don't care if I upset anybody's feelings or apple cart. I've been shopping around for you because your local hospital is full of very competent people, but I checked, and they're still doing the 1950 surgery for your type of cancer. I've discovered that Dr. George P. Connick in Halifax left North America because we're behind, and he went to, I think it was Sweden, and he learned the newest surgery. He didn't have to do that. It was a 6 months 6 months extra of learning. He just graduated after 9 years. Who goes back to school after 9 years? Anyways,
Right.
Dr. George took good care of me. I'm all put back together. As I put it, I'm now a high mileage scratch and dent guy. But that one doctor trained me about advocacy. It's good to find out what the standards are, but what else is out there? So everybody's fine now, but my daughter had a brain tumor. The local hospital and the regional hospital. Local hospital, we can't do the surgery. It's too complex and dangerous. Okay, good to know. Appreciate that. You're not going to try to do it. But the regional expert who did these surgeries, I do one a year. Oh, famous North American hospital, 3.5 hours, 2.5 hours down the highway. Oh, I do this nothing but. I'm a specialist. I only do these surgeries. I do 4 a week. So down the highway we went.
Of course.
So learning to advocate politely.
How old is your daughter? What you got?
She was 7 at the time. She had a tumor on this side as big as a male thumb, and then the scar tissue was as big as a male thumb. And she'd gone from petit mal to grand mal seizures in 90 days.
My word.
So she's now 38, post-secondary education. She's a music therapist on the east part of Canada.
Wow. And
she's got some other advanced education. And so, wow.
So to you, what does advocacy mean to you? You've mentioned this a couple times.
Advocacy is what is the preferred outcomes? Respectful to all, safety for all, unless there's a person that's an agitator that's being unsafe to themselves and others, in which case safety for those that are being victimized, and then a process to get there, whether it's legal, physical, emotional, because I've advocated for people for mental health in the past when they weren't quite getting what they needed.
Yeah.
So
are you talking about advocacy for yourself? Are you talking about advocacy for others? Or are you talking about
yourself, advocacy for others, advocacy for a family, for a community? I'm doing some low-level advocacy about a local crosswalk as an example, and I'm not being listened to. So the next thing is to start to name names about people who haven't been listening and saying, would you like to be in the news? Because there's so much traffic. It was designed in 1960s. It's 2000 and we now have a few 100,000 people that live close to the crosswalk now they weren't here in the 60s. This was a sleepy little crosswalk that got used 100 times a day back then. Now it's used a couple thousand some days, and people are driving around people in the middle of the crosswalk. Anyways, so advocacy is really important. I've advocated when I was a retail consultant. I advocated for my clients to head office when I thought we made mistakes. I advocated for head office with clients when they were being grouchy.
Yeah.
I had clients call clients to advocate for them to join a buying group to save budget.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's just a natural thing to do to me.
I was going to say advocacy really is about, wanting what's right and what's best for yourself or for others. And I think a lot of us get hung up right there, right? Because we either think, one, we don't deserve it, or we're not going to stand up for ourselves, or we're going to be rejected, or we're going to face resistance. Or when we face resistance, then that's the end of the line. But you're talking about something much more powerful than that. You're talking about, what the end is, and you know that it's right and just and true and moral and pure and what's the best outcome. And you're going to push through any roadblocks that come up because of the preferred outcome. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. So I'm a big advocate. Years ago when I sold retail and consulted in retail, I had a bookstore client, and I went in one day, and the manager and I were going to have a meeting in like 3 minutes, and we're hanging out at the desk while she waited for somebody to come back from lunch at the order desk, and the phone rang. Oh, Law Society. Yes. How many copies? 112? Absolutely. Do you want to get one extra? Because last 3 times you've added one to the order, and it was too late. Okay, 113 it is. What is the Law Society ordering? Oh, there's this book called Getting to Yes by the Harvard Negotiations Project. Oh, put me down for one.
Yeah,
so
114.
Because I grew up with parents that negotiated for better things. When I was a teenager, I grew up in a rural area, but it was the second wealthiest place in North America per capita, and we had a real drug issue with the kids of high income. And we had legal issues with them that were out of proportion. We were getting kids arrested for trafficking. They weren't trafficking. They bought a party platter, okay? Yeah. They were going to have 50 friends over.
Right.
I grew up in a bungalow, 1,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. I had friends that went to private school and public school, and one of the kids had 22 pairs of shoes just for school.
Sure.
More power to them. Stimulate the economy. I went to school with a family where the kids had 8 large heating units in their house because it was, I think, 11,000 square foot home. So my mother said to my father, and there was a big meeting in the community, these kids need something to do. We live in a one-horse town. 1 bus out in the morning on Friday, Monday to Friday, and 1 bus home. Nothing to do on the weekends. I got one of the coveted less than 25 part-time jobs in town at the local hardware store. So they opened up a drop-in center. Another church took on the entertainment piece. One Saturday night a month, they brought in a local music group on the way up to do some pretty amazing things. I was too young to get in, but I got allowed to come in because I was well-behaved and sat in the front row, kept my mouth shut.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I saw music groups that went on to be famous, like Prairie Oyster, you might have heard of. There's some other groups whose names I forget, but I know they went on to regional and provincial or state fame. So, yeah, so negotiations and collaboration to push things forward for better quality experiences and outcomes, that's, to me, is all part of being resilient.
So what is it then inside of us? How do we get past our own self, our own fears, our own, self-worth or whatever that is, to become an advocate? Because you've had to do this for yourself and you've had to do it for your daughter. And now you're doing it for organizations and communities. What is it in you? How do people get from where they're stuck to where you are, where they're really going to get there? They're going to advocate.
Part of it, you have to reflect and say, how do I currently define myself? So when I taught career search to long-term unemployed, some of them have been out of work for 10 years. If there was a picture in a dictionary, a private dictionary, only you can see your dictionary, there's a picture of you, but there's words, phrases, paragraphs, whole chapters, and there's videos, snippets, audios, and there's 3 basic things in there. They fall into 3 categories. Really negative, they're a lie. Mixed message, part lie, part truth, and really positive, part lie, part truth. You got to do cleaning up, and all the ones that are untrue, throw them away. And so it's serious self-reflection. So in grade 1, Miss Patton told my parents by letter that Michael has some very incredible skills in the classroom and especially in the playground. Michael, unfortunately, seems to have a motor control issue for printing. Very true. I haven't been formally tested, but it appears that I'm part of the 1% where this doesn't come to here very well. I took piano lessons for 8 years. That didn't help it. I took keyboarding, made it easier to communicate with others, but that didn't help it. But anyways, she framed it in the best possible way, that I was not defective. The school system thought it was important. She didn't think it was important. So just do your best, Michael, because I think you have exceptional skills in other areas. And I lived on that for years.
Totally. Absolutely.
7 years to get through 4 years of high school because I don't spell well as part of the writing issue, part of this 1% that has this brain issue. But fortunately, what nature takes away in one way, the brain injury, we don't know, it gives back in other ways. So I'm told, above average linguistic skills. So I can pontificate splendiferously as the occasion requires.
I think we both have that superpower.
I think so. So advocating for self, advocating for others, being resilient, looking at how do you define yourself is a big piece of why are you worthy? Yeah. When I'm at my best, I can help others be at my best. So that's the least reason to do it. Oh, when I'm at my best, I'm a better parent. And I can keep my kids safer, more productive, and help them learn how to be more successful in life in different categories. And I'm proud to say my oldest has gone on and get the labor laws in Canada changed. Wow. It turns out as she was working towards getting a trade, our labor laws didn't allow pregnant women early maternity leave, but she was working as a boat welder, and her doctor found out when she was pregnant, the doctor said, "Oh, you're done. You can't work anymore." Oh. Well, my maternity benefits don't kick in for like 3 more months. So she did what makes me proud. She went to her federal government representative, who went to his cabinet shadows. They weren't in power at the time. Doesn't matter. Anyways, within a year, it was changed. Women who work in dangerous industries that get pregnant can get their maternity leave early. Doesn't cost the government or the citizens or companies a penny extra. Just it needed to be changed. So she changed it. It's like, yes, that's my girl.
Yeah, fantastic. The apple didn't fall from the tree there.
No. Well, her great-grandfather, my grandfather, helped start a political party. He lost an eyeball in the workplace and found out he had no rights. but the eyeball got lost because somebody didn't follow safety protocols, took a guard off a machine to increase productivity.
Yeah.
So my grandfather went from ultra conservative to ultra Democrat.
Wow.
And
Hey,
went door to door. So
we've only got about 6 minutes left on this podcast, Michael, but I certainly want to get you on again. But before we close, I want to make this one reflection and let you say something as well. I was just watching Tony Robbins' documentary on Netflix, Day of Destiny or something like that. But one of the things he said that jumped out to me was, life either happens to you or life happens for you. And what you believe about those two phrases changes everything. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. Things will happen despite best efforts. I didn't ask for cancer. My mom's father had cancer in the same location, but it was the 70s. They didn't want, her husband didn't want, her mother did, his wife didn't want an autopsy. So we don't know if it was the identical cancer, but it was in the hepatic flexure. Mine was in the hepatic flexure, probably. So, but you know, I figured I was good to 75. Just get a colonoscopy once a year when you're over the age of 50. And what do you need to worry about, right? Well, but my doctor, my GP, she made things happen for me that changed my life. Because a 1950 surgery would have been workable, but it would have meant I would have needed a surgery every 5 to 7 years to keep me in shape.
Yeah.
And that was remarkable. And somebody said later, but Michael, that's what you do in business. You attracted her to be that way for you. If you'd have been one of those Eeyores, it's okay, I'll stay on this side of the harbor in Halifax because it saves me 40 minutes. And I was like, no, what's in Montreal? What's in Halifax? What's in Boston? What's in Toronto? Let's do this. Let's gear up. Yeah, and I found out later, I passed a psychological test for exactly the issue you mentioned. Because the doctors and one of the nurses asked me the same set of questions, just with slightly different language. And at first I was like, oh, this is interesting. They wanted to know if I could go the distance.
Sure. Absolutely.
The 1950s was one surgery, and this way was supposed to be 3.
Yeah. Wow, this is so rich. I can't wait to talk more with you about this. And what I did hear you saying in more than one ways is that through your grandparents, your parents, through this special teachers that saw you not as a limitation, but as a you know, just a different way that people are wired. And the fact that this one mentor took you under his wing and gave you the trust and all the skills. I think there's something so important about this advocacy piece, because you need to advocate for yourself, of course. And as you advocate for others, then they get the power to advocate for themselves as well.
And it grows.
It grows.
And it grows and it grows and it grows. And you have to learn to advocate for yourself inside yourself.
Yes.
Because when you're tired and weary, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to bother.
Right.
Wait a minute. When I worked as a kid at retail in Sears back in the 70s, when Sears was the department store in Canada, I'd go in every 90 days and say to my manager, how's my numbers? You're doing good. And I know what you're doing, you cheeky so-and-so. I can't give you a raise every 90 days, but I give you a bigger one at the 6-month mark. But he had a PhD in industrial psychology, and because I was willing to be polite and push, he gave me extra insights and coaching, which not everybody got.
Sure.
I ended up making $1.50 an hour more than my friends in that job because I was making things happen.
Yeah. And you just hinted at just briefly a couple times at the law of attraction, right? That because you were positive, because you believed it could happen, because you were willing to look for it and search for it and push for it, then those are the type of people and experts that were drawn to you as well. And you know,
stayed respectful.
Stayed respectful, right?
Even with the grouchy lady a few departments over, who ended up being a great friend. But the first couple of times she met me, she judged me because she was also tired. And I pushed back. And boy, did you ever make her mad. I should listen. No, not if you're going to be rude. Don't need to listen to rude.
Exactly.
Anyway, yes, staying respectful changes everything.
In our last 60 seconds, Michael, tell people, how can they find you? How can they find what you do? Give us the connections.
If you're in Facebook, go to Resiliency for Life group and apply. And the reason we apply is it helps keep the spam down to close to 0. Yes. And it also means we keep the people that are nasty out of the group. And there we share lessons and skills and beliefs on how to be more resilient so we can thrive with better quality experiences and better outcomes. We have a couple hundred items there. And also just resiliencyforlife.com.
And I believe you published a book recently as well?
I did. I'm big on quotes. And so I published 101 quotes. There's 3 or 4 of mine in the book, and the rest are other experts from over the decades that I love. Okay,
so I'd like to claim a place in the quote book on your sequel, all right, when we get to there.
Yes, please.
All right. So for Mojo Studios, this is Joe McCarthy. This is Michael H. Ballard of Resiliency for Life. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to continuing it.
Thank you.
For all of you out there, just remember that the biggest obstacle is between your ears. Don't let yourself hold yourself back, and find an advocate who will help push you through as well. God bless you all. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye.